Thank you very much. So we're here to talk about Graham's new memoir, Tough Crowd. It really is an absolutely fantastic book, but more than that, I think it's a kind of monument to the insanity of our times. I don't think 10 years ago, any of us here tonight would have thought that we would be where we are today as a society on some of these issues, not just to do with gender and sexuality, but also to do with the comedy industry and the arts and creativity. I certainly didn't think I would be here, Graham, because we had a Twitter spat about 8 years ago where you basically called me a fascist. So the world has turned upside down, hasn't it? You know.
Very much has.
Here you are.
I would have been so much nicer to so many people if I'd known that they would eventually be my only friends. You know, like the other day I was interviewed by Rod Little, you know, and I remember about Rod Little doing what everybody else does. You push your pregnant wife down the stairs, all this stuff. And it's like one fact that's been repeated by everybody and everybody does it.
Yeah.
And you just repeat it because that's what you do.
Yeah.
You know, so I take great pleasure in meeting people like that now and finding out who they really are.
Yeah, I mean, that's been fascinating, hasn't it? The power of narratives, seeing that and seeing through the reputations that form around people, you know?
Yeah, and it's like, and I don't want to jump in because like one of the things I was saying that no one knows this book is about Father Ted. Everyone thinks it's about this issue. But you know, it's the same kind of received insights, the same kind of thought-terminating cliches that just are throughout this whole debate.
Absolutely. But that's really important that you mentioned that really this book is about your comedy career. And, you know, it should be obvious, it's in the subtitle, but, you know, people have been so taken over by what has been said about you and all these various things. But at heart, you're just a brilliant comedy writer. And the thing that I absolutely love this book, and I think it's, first and foremost, it's really hilarious. It's genuinely laugh out loud funny. You have a brilliant turn of phrase. It's a reminder of just how significant you are as a comedy writer, and that I think has been forgotten. But let's talk about that process, because you started off in music journalism, and you went from there into comedy. How did that happen?
Well, you know, I came over to the UK to write for a magazine called Select, which was the kind of Britpop magazine, I guess you could say. It kind of had something to do with that like weird little period where everybody was pretending it was the 60s again, and it wasn't, but it was good. It was fun. It had its own thing. But I came over, and this is in the book, the very first day we were given a memo that said that had all the house rules for how you could write for Select, which I'd never known there was even such a thing, that people could tell writers how to write. And the first rule was no use of the word I. So that just killed my whole style was based on me talking about myself, making fun of myself, and also kind of giving a subjective view of the music, because I think that's really the only way, well, personally for me, that's the way I wrote about it. So they said no use of the word I. So I came over to London, and I immediately kind of got fired on the same day because that writer was no longer allowed to write. So I kind of carved a space out for myself, and then eventually, you know, I would just keep trying to get the jokes in. And Arthur was over in Dublin, and we'd been working together, and we'd been writing somewhat successfully. We were making audiences laugh with various little things we were doing. Like Arthur was in a band called the Joshua Trio, which was a parody band. And we just knew we could do it. And we used to watch TV. And I remember there was a show at the time, a very political show. People might be able to guess it, but I won't be mean. And it was very, very right on. And it was winning BAFTAs every year. And when I was at school, we were so bored, I remember once, that we used to sit in the radiator to see how long we could sit on it. And we called it the radiator test. You know, that's what we did. That's what we would do with this show. We would see how long we could bear watching it, because it was so unfunny and it was so right on.
I hope you tell me what it is afterwards.
I will, yeah.
Okay.
And eventually, like, we just thought, well, I mean, it's good. I think when you're trying to get into an industry like this, it's good to have something to aim for.
Yeah.
And it's good to have something that you think, well, we can beat that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we thought. We just thought, well, we can, like, we know we.
And you didn't necessarily get it right first time. I mean, you talk in the book about a sitcom I wasn't familiar with, Paris.
Yeah, Paris. Yeah.
I wasn't aware of this.
Good. It's good on paper. You know, it was about like artists in the South Bank. I I don't even know whether we decided whether it was the 20s or the 10s, but like, you know, it was full of jokes. Like it was very Blackadder. We had one joke that went, they're all reminiscing about movies, and I go, oh, do you remember people coming out of factory? Do you remember train pulling into station? They were real movies, you know. And it was like that kind of, it was that kind of thing. And Alexei Sayle played a kind of a, like we'd just seen Lust for Life, where Kirk Douglas plays Van Gogh, as if he's just got a terrible headache throughout the film.
Yeah.
And he's just like this all through the film. We just thought it was really funny. But a whole series of that didn't work, we realised.
What do you think didn't work about it? Because I watched a bit of it, because it's on YouTube, you know, you can find it. Yeah, it's all on some dodgy dark website. And it is funny. It is funny, but then,
it has its moments.
Is it just that it didn't chime at the time or something?
No, I'll tell you what it was. We wouldn't be told. I was kind of looking to Arthur to how to behave in these things, and Arthur hates rewriting.
Yes.
And they would come up to Arthur and they'd go, they'd come up to us both and they'd say, this is 12 minutes over. Yeah. Right? And it's like, well, we're not cutting anything. These are great jokes, we're not cutting it. You know? And then, you know, so you keep it in, and the audience sees it in the studio, and then you get into the editing room, and they go, well, you got to lose 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, well, no, we won't run ads. No.
I mean, that's...
And so basically what happened was all the plot was the only thing left in the show, and all the jokes had to be chucked out. So that was when I realized, oh, executives aren't trying to destroy your show, they're trying to help you.
So that's really interesting, because you often characterize yourself in this book as being more a kind of rewriter than a writer, or that rewriting is integral to the writing process.
Yeah.
And I've actually got a quote here on page 120. You talk about the idea that the first thing out of your pen, everyone has to kiss its ass, is ludicrous. Writing is rewriting, and writers who don't rewrite are a liability.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you learned from the experience with Paris, that you can't be too precious about stuff.
No. I mean, you know, 24 minutes is 24 minutes. And the thing that the people see in the end is only what is on screen.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the audience loved a certain bit in the studio. It's just what's on screen. That's the only important thing.
Isn't that part of the joy of the discipline of a sitcom, is that it is contained in that way?
Yeah, well, that's what it taught us. We suddenly cut the fat every episode. Like I remember, again, sorry, these are all stories from the book, but I guess that's why I put them in there. But but like, you know, when we wrote the episode of A Song for Europe, which was about Ted and Dougal entering the Eurovision Song Contest, we had a whole scene where they record the song. And it was based on, I don't know if anyone here is from Dublin or Ireland, around my age. Anyone? Any Irish people? No, yeah? Do you remember B.P. Fallon? B.P. Fallon, no. B.P. Fallon was just a kind of hippie guy who was hanging around Dublin. He had a DJ, he was a DJ and stuff like this, and he was famously a stoner, you know. So we had this character who was recording the song "My Lovely Horse," you know, and we had one scene where it just opens and he's talking to them in the other room, and he goes, "Best take yet, guys. I think we got it." And it cuts to Ted and Dougal, and they're setting up their equipment. And we haven't. They're still setting up the equipment, you know. And, and he was just like this really untogether guy. And it was every every line he said was hilarious, and it just didn't fit. It just didn't fit. And that was actually the moment where I realized that if you're throwing out really funny stuff, then you're in the best position you could be in.
Well, that's the amazing thing about Father Ted, is the hit rate on that series, on the 3 series of Father Ted.
That was the efficiency, and we just realized, you know, everything has to either be funny, tell the story, or, you know, reveal character.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't do those things, then it really has to earn its way in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's just funny for its own sake, great. But sometimes you just have to be savage.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I love about the book as well is that I think anyone who's interested in getting into comedy writing should read it as a kind of manual into what to avoid. You've got all these incredible tips. You talk about, for instance, the idea of the true north of a comedy show. Can you sort of describe what you mean by that?
Well, no, I think that particular bit is just that sometimes when you write a first draft, you might be following a storyline that you've come up in your kind of conscious mind has come up with
Yeah.
it, and you'll write it out. It'll be good. It'll have funny moments and maybe a central thing that's worth protecting and really good. But sometimes that central thing won't be there. There was an episode called "The Beast of Craggy Island," which was about Ted and Dougal investigating a ridiculous crime to do with a sheep competition. It was, I don't even want to go into it. But that whole thing began as an episode about Ted and Dougal on the top deck of a bus, unable to get down because there was a small dog yapping up at them from the lower deck. And we wrote this. It was very funny. Just a long conversation about this dog and will it kill it? It couldn't kill it. It was too small. All this sort of stuff. And it was great, but we just didn't know how to get them down.
Yeah.
And so we looked back at it, and we thought Beast of Craggy Island, and then we realised, oh, wait a sec, Ted and Dougal are kind of like Holmes and Watson. And we've got this title, we've got Holmes and Watson, and and what happens is you write 15 pages, which is 15 minutes of screen time, and you think, well, that's 15 minutes, we have to throw it out.
Yeah.
You know? But the truth is, you could be sitting with that 15 minutes for weeks if it's not right. So once we threw it out, the whole thing wrote itself.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's the thing. The premise has to be sound. In the book, you talk about if you're just punching up jokes on a flawed premise, that's like mopping off ice on the deck of the Titanic. That's the way you put it.
Yeah.
That you have to get the kind of structure in place and all that kind of thing. And I think people just, because it seems so effortless when you watch a Father Ted episode, I think people don't realise the kind of the graft that goes into that kind of thing.
Well, that's the thing. Again, that's like writing a book. I mean, even up until writing this book, I thought people are just brilliant. They just go, well, Martin Amis says, oh, that was nice. I like that one. I'll keep that in, you know. But no, it's like combing something, and you remove all the impurities and all the things that don't point in a certain way, and it's a lovely process.
And Father Ted
nothing to do with actually experiencing a work of art.
Yeah.
You know?
And so Father Ted came out of an idea that was part of a bigger series with various characters. So and people won't know. There's all sorts of stuff I didn't know about what went into Father Ted. Most notably, I have to say, I didn't realise that Mrs. Doyle's mole moves around her face from episode to episode, and I only found that out from reading the book.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone picked up on that. To be honest.
No,
that's the attention to detail of your craft.
Also, yeah, absolutely. And also, like for people who wear nothing except black and colours, have a look at Dougal's jumpers every week. There's like a real range of colours there, you know. And they had to do. I mean, they had to do that because, like, you know, for continuity reasons, to keep themselves sane and know, okay, this is pink jumper week, you know?
Yeah.
But it also gives a little bit more of a kind of invisible quality to it that's quite charming.
Yeah.
You know?
But of course, you were very hands-on with it. I mean, you were there on set all the time, maybe more than a lot of writers are.
Yeah, because Paris was a disaster. So, and we weren't allowed. We didn't really know we didn't know how to make shows. So Paris was such a painful thing. We used to get time out. Remember time out? And we couldn't buy time out for 6 weeks because the reviews were so awful, you know. And so we didn't want that to happen again. And we also had this added pressure, which was if it was accused of paddywhackery, if it was seen to be adding to the idea of the Irish as I'm going to list this now, it's not going to sound good, a bunch of drunken idiots, then Jack might not go down so well, Dougal might not go down so well. So we had to make sure we had constant control because we could tell the difference when something tips over into something. Something actually did survive that I wish we'd taken out, which was the Deliverance scene in the first episode where we did a little parody of Deliverance.
Yeah.
I felt that swayed too close to that kind of thing.
Right.
But you know, and it was in the first episode, so I was freaking out. I was thinking, oh, we've got this Deliverance joke. And
so when did you know that this was going to be a big hit?
Probably when we saw people dressing up as members, as nuns in the second series.
Yeah, that's always a good sign, isn't it?
We went out, you know, you go out into the audience and you see nuns in the audience and you think, they're not nuns.
But of course, you also had, I think part of the key to the success was the casting.
Yeah.
It was absolutely spot on. And it could, you know, a flaw there could have really scuppered it.
Yeah, and I was actually kind of originally, I wasn't I didn't really get Dermot to start with.
Yeah.
Because Arthur used to do Father Ted as a stand-up character. And Arthur's delivery of Ted was very like this. It was very, he would never curse or smoke or anything like that. Slightly camp, you know. He had a great joke that he once said, because he used to be in this band, and he'd put the collar on and come out in front of the audience, or come out in front of the band, and he'd say to the audience, if there's anyone at the back who can't see, say hello to them. They're from St. Kevin's School for the Blind. And he would just say, for me, that kind of lilting, you know.
So that's what you had in mind when
that's what I had in mind.
First, yeah.
And I was outraged that Arthur wasn't playing him. But Arthur was like, I'm not an actor. I can't act.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I guess that is a problem. And,
but Dermot's so key as the kind of heart of it. And what was
he turned it into something else. He like the once we started writing for him, the character clicked into focus, not just as a funny guy who comes out and talks to the audience at gigs, but as this very driven, unhappy man who is just trying to find an angle. And Dermot really gave us that. Well,
I was surprised because you say in the book about how Dermot was troubled, I suppose is the word, because Ardal O'Hanlon was getting all the big laughs.
Well, you know, that was inevitable because Ardal's jokes were non sequiturs.
Yeah.
So they would come out of nowhere. He would say things that were just not connected to the story.
Yeah.
And the audience would be so surprised, they would just howl with laughter.
Yeah.
And so, you know, also because they're non sequiturs and they're not really kind of, as an actor, you're looking for things that flow.
Yes.
So they can kind of jolt you a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And Dermot was just like everyone else. You know, he was known in Dublin as being you know, he was the famous one between him and Ardal. So I think it just knocked him back a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, I think he's brilliant in it, and
he got used to it. He got used to it, and he found a way through it. And he and Ardal ended up getting on great. You know?
But this is a really good example of when you talk about in the book about the flawed premises. You'd kind of, even within the anarchic logic of Father Ted, there's a reason why he's there, which is his tendency to embellish money, which means, you know, he's been sent there, so he has to put up with all this stuff.
Yeah,
you know, it makes sense of it, you know?
Yeah, Griff Rhys-Jones, that's one of the first things. When we were learning at Griff Rhys-Jones's knee, because he was our first job, and he was telling us how to write sketches and stuff, or, you know, suggesting things and concepts and talk. He's a real theorist, you know, Griff. And Griff just said you have to have a trap. If there's a reason, you can't have people who hate each other or drive each other mad.
Yeah.
And they could just walk away. Like if those kinds of questions for an audience. Why is he hanging around with him?
Yeah.
You know, why don't they just do this? Why don't they just, they're deathly.
Well, you talk about the idea of an out, that an audience is looking for an out sometimes.
Yes.
That, like, maybe it's a bad joke or a character who doesn't work and they think, right, I'm not watching anymore. And that's what you've got to avoid.
Yeah, I bet everyone shares that. Like a new show, you've heard it's good, you don't know if you like it or not. You know, one thing makes you go, you'll let that one go. Second one, you know, third one, you're gone.
Yeah.
You know, so the thing is to try and create shows that don't give. And that's what like note sessions are. That's what when, you know, you read you do a table read with actors, and all the actors are seeing the story through their kind of journey through the story.
Yes.
And so if they hit something, like, why is my character angry here? I wouldn't be angry. I'd be happy that just happened.
Yeah.
And this is the first time you've thought of these things as well. So suddenly, like, you have to navigate a different route through the story that was very different to the one that sat you down in the first place to write it down.
Yes.
But that's what I love about it. There are always opportunities. They're like, whenever someone says, "Don't believe they do this," you go away, you think about it. It can just give you the greatest moments. You know.
Yes.
Always one. I'll give you a good example. One episode. One episode was about, oh God, saying these out loud makes me, was about Bishop Brennan coming, and he's got a fear of rabbits, right? And of course the house becomes infested with rabbits. And I was kind of thinking, well, where did they get the rabbits? Why don't they just give them back, you know? And I just couldn't figure it out. Why don't they just get rid of the rabbits? So we gave Dougal the line. Ted goes, why don't we just give him back to shop? And Dougal says, no, Ted, it was a travelling pet shop. It won't be back till spring. So that's a joke that That's a joke that would not have existed if we had just had this kind of easy, the story that just made sense all the way through.
Yes.
It jumped into existence because of a problem.
Yeah.
And that's what I love problem solving. That's my favorite thing.
You have an episode with hairy babies. And I mention that because there's someone in this room who was meant to be one of the hairy babies who's sitting over there.
Ewan, would you mind standing up to show what a hairy baby would have looked like right now?
But no, we should point out this is actually a bad anecdote because he didn't play the hairy baby. Yeah. He was meant to play the hairy baby, but he was sick.
Yeah.
So your legacy's gone. Yeah.
He demanded too many rusks.
So much about Father Ted was the collaboration with Arthur Matthews, and it feels from reading the book that you just had that nailed. Everything about it kind of worked and gelled, and the nature of your relationship really energized the comedy. But then, of course, you worked with other people. Black Books, for example, is you're working with someone else there.
Yeah.
So which did you prefer as a kind of process? Or was that just you working with someone else? Did you feel like it was... a divorce or something, I suppose.
Well, yeah, it was weird. It was just a strange one. I can't really... working with Arthur was just the best. It was always... He's a genius. He's just one of the funniest people who's ever lived. And the other great thing about him is that he's not frightened of the empty page.
Yeah.
So he would fill it up. And some of it sometimes wouldn't work or would be a little bit... you might get a conversation that goes on for too long and doesn't really advance the story. And because Arthur was 9 years my senior, and I was kind of terrified of him because he also had a bit of a, intimidating air.
Yeah.
That I would never be able to say, I don't like that joke. So I would take it away and I'd go, it's great. Let me just try one thing. And I would take out bits I didn't like and replace them with stuff I did like. And he would always go for it if it was funnier.
Yeah.
If it wasn't funnier, he'd complain. But if it was funnier, he didn't care.
But that's interesting because your relationship then is you trying to impress him.
But then what happened was I went away, we won a BAFTA for Black Books, and then I was just an arrogant piece of shit who didn't take advice from anyone. So we came back in the not arrogance as such, but that kind of relationship that we had broken down. Because I was like, well... I would now be saying, I don't like that bit.
Isn't that interesting? There's so many writing partnerships eventually sort of disintegrate, don't
There's
they?
an interesting theory that every writer is left brain dominant or right brain dominant.
Yeah.
And Arthur and I proved that, I think, better than anyone, you know, because Arthur is just pure creativity. And
so then when it comes to the IT crowd, that's very much your baby by yourself.
Yeah.
It's so that must have been exciting, yeah?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I love the actors. The actors became my kind of collaborators on that one. But I made some terrible mistakes. I probably, as I say in the book, I probably shaved a few years off the end of my life because I was still inexperienced and I would be fooled by the read-throughs because read-throughs are always terrible.
Yeah.
Sometimes the actors, it's the first time they've read the script because actors are hilariously lazy, you know. And you're there thinking, oh, I screwed this one up.
Particularly with comedy, right?
Yeah.
You're not necessarily getting the laughs.
Yeah, so I would say, look, this is a disaster. I'm going home to rewrite it. And I'd go home and rewrite it, and I'd be working till 2 or 3 in the morning, come in with a new script the next day, and it would still be bad. Because like, you know, it's the read-through. The read-through is the problem.
Yeah.
So it was doing that wrong that kind of set me up later on because I realized you don't go home.
Yeah.
You know, you fix the problems there and you get it on its feet and you have a normal life at the end of the day, you know.
I mean, it's similar to stand-up in a way. There's a lot of stand-ups, if it doesn't work with the crowd, they jettison the joke. Whereas actually sometimes it is the audience's fault.
Yeah, well, I live by that.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing stand-up recently. I'm quite privileged because you've been doing that at my club, at the Comedy Unleashed Club.
Yeah.
And
the only place that would have me.
Exactly. That's what we do. We hoover up the cancelled and the unpopular.
Yeah. An island of broken toys.
That should be on our poster.
Yes.
But you know, it was going so well, and then of course you did the gig in Edinburgh, and it got cancelled, and second venue got cancelled, and then you were brave, and I really do admire you for this, doing it outside the Scottish Parliament on a little stage, as a lot of people pointed out, that's punk. That's you know, that's
It's so funny. I mean, you know, I used to make fun of like I've never liked the taboo around what's the word I'm looking for. I've always felt that the idea of selling out
yeah.
is a terrible idea. It's like, you know, your job as an artist, I think, should be to get across to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And if that brings riches your way, then great. That's great too. But I am quite impressed by myself. That's brilliant. That's going to look really good. in that I'm not selling out. You know, I won't do it. You know.
Well, it is. I mean, it becomes about principle. Obviously, that gig was never going to work because it's an out. You know, the best comedy gigs are low ceiling, lights pointing the right way. This was an outdoor gig, no ceiling at all.
Yeah.
And there was only 2 hours to let people know it was on. So the fact that you got 50 people turn up was a miracle in of itself. The press are there, the BBC there with cameras. This is your 8th gig.
I know.
So really, it was about saying no. At the Edinburgh Fringe of all places, the biggest arts festival in the world. There shouldn't be a case where comedy venues are saying no.
Well, I always like my joke about my status because like they had it on the poster early on, cancelled, including a cancelled comedian.
Yeah,
and everyone's fine with that. But it's like Graham Linehan. Oh no, we didn't think he was that cancelled. And I often point out that 1 year there were 2 TV shows called Cancelled, and I wasn't on either of them.
Yeah, you're so cancelled that you're even unmentionable on the cancelled show.
I don't exist.
Yeah.
To a lot of people, it's very, very.
But in spite of your accolades, and you know, the back of the book has your various awards in a cardboard box. You know, so it's unfathomable that can happen. And yet the circumstances that we live in make sense of it. I mean, you mention in the book about the importance of protecting comedy as a genre, as a medium. You actually have written the quote down. You say you're talking about the Jerry Sadowitz cancellation. This is a veteran stand-up and magician from the circuit, beloved by lots, even though he's very offensive, very much so. But no one really protected him. This was last year at the Edinburgh Fringe. Mm-hmm. He did one show, a member of staff complained, and then the second show was pulled. So the venue said, no, we're not having it.
Yeah.
Even with someone like that. And you say in the book, you say, in a time of rampant conformity, the jester should be a protected species. We should be breeding them like pandas, not pushing them towards extinction. Which is a very good example of the way you write, and the wit of the book is fantastic. But the point is profound.
That used to be different. I thought it was too smart. I said, I'd breed them like pandas if I could bear the sound of jangling bells.
Maybe you should have gone with that. But it's
too late.
But it's the point that counts, isn't it? And
yeah, I mean, and also, I'm aware that people aren't. I've got to be careful, I guess, because people aren't here to defend themselves. But I think only Richard Herring stood up for Jerry Sadowitz.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, and like, you know, Stuart Lee, who wrote a very good piece about Sadowitz, completely silent. You know, and I just find it shocking that all of these guys who often were kind of counterculture type guys. Yeah. Stuart Lee's always been very counterculture, and they're silent. They're silent. They're letting all these kind of travesties happen. You know?
But why?
Like Elaine Miller's treatment in Scotland was disgraceful.
Elaine Miller's a stand-up comic who performed at the Edinburgh Fringe. The people picketed her event. Well, they spat at her on the street.
Another comedian spat at her on the street because she did a show called Viva Your Vulva, which was about because she's a physio and she teaches women about how to take care of themselves post-menopause and stuff like that. And this made her a target, you know. We had to go off miles away to have a drink because anywhere else we went, we'd be, you know.
So, but what I'm always struggled with is how that's happened within the comedy industry of all places, because there used to be a belief that even if it was offensive and misjudged, that's part of the deal. That sometimes happens in comedy, and comedians have to be able to take risks.
Every single joke is a tightrope walk, and you know, I've seen. Luckily, there's certain people. I mean, obviously, his behaviour is a different conversation. But I was very impressed to see Louis C.K. When he did come back and kind of get over his own cancellation, whether it was justified or not. He really goes for it. He really goes for it. He does a routine about the gift shop at Auschwitz, you know? Like the fact that there is a gift shop at Auschwitz, it's very strange, and it's an interesting thing to point out, and it's very human. It's about being human in the world.
Yes.
And you need to be able to talk about these opposing pressures in our lives that we're all subject to without being killed when you slip into the wrong side of it. Do you know what I mean?
Is it to do with
failing to get a laugh is bad enough.
Yeah.
You don't want to destroy their lives over a joke.
That's it. So, because the whole thing with the jester, with the court jester, with the fool in King Lear, he can say whatever he wants. He's not going to get decapitated for it.
But that's the problem, because now the mob is in power. The mob is sitting in the king's throne.
Yeah.
And the thing that the jester used to be, Polly's heard me going on about this one. Sorry, my friend Polly's there.
No one else has, Graham.
Yes, I know. Sorry.
So we should hear it.
I do that in the stand-up as well. Constantly saying hello to people, and everyone else is excluded. But the jester, his role in a court, and I only know all this because I got this amazing book called. The name is gone. Jesters Are Everywhere, I think it's called, and it's a history of the jester.
Yeah.
And he says apparently, like in all the kind of histories he read from all over the world. Jesters in China, the Middle East, everywhere. No one ever said, the king had this strange bloke called a jester with him. Everyone was always like, oh, there was a jester.
Yeah.
You know? So this is a role that's been accepted. And from what I can see, a lot of the time, the role of the jester was to represent the common man to the king.
Yeah.
So the king would go, okay, what are they making fun? Why are they making fun of me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a valuable service to a king.
But it stops tyranny.
Yes.
Because there's someone who's willing to say
there's someone
to the king
who's risking their lives every day by telling the king exactly what they think. But when the mob is in power, then there's no single figure to speak to. You're suddenly not allowed to say anything because everyone's like, well, it's going to be a bit that's going to be a bit offensive if you start saying, "There's my friend over there, he's," you know what I mean? And it's like suddenly you get a self-consciousness that means that possibly one of the most integral figures in human history, the jester, can't do his job.
But the way that that's been actuated is that the mob, in this case, claim to be the marginalized, the underdogs. So they're in power while at the same time claiming to be not.
They look very like middle-class white people, though, don't they?
They have that air about them, don't they? Yeah.
Something about, They seem to be in industries like publishing and comedy and media and journalism. It's very strange how
Isn't
these,
it?
But anyway.
But how is it also to do with literal mindedness? I mean, you mentioned Louis C.K., and one of his gigs, when there was some leaked audio of a gig during the cancellation period.
Yes.
And he was talking about the school shootings in America.
Yes.
And the headline of The Independent said, Louis C.K. mocks survivors of school shootings. And you think, you'd have to have the brain of a cabbage to actually think that's what he was saying.
Well, Chappelle got the same thing when Chappelle was talking about the Michael Jackson documentary. Yeah. He set up this unbelievably funny joke. Shall I try and massacre it? He said, imagine being one of the kids who Michael Jackson abused on the Monday after, back at school. How was your weekend? How was my weekend? I got blown by the king of pop. But that was the whole point of the joke. It was setting up to this hilarious. How was my weekend? I still see it. And what they are saying, you're absolutely right, especially with the Louis C.K. story, because that was like a tryout where he was developing material. Yeah. They're saying, no, you can no longer say these things. You can no longer even go into the area where the jokes live. Yeah.
But when you were writing Father Ted, there was a sense of subversion about this because the Catholic Church was still very prominent in Ireland in a way that I don't think they are now, actually.
In fact, one day me and Arthur read a newspaper and it said, it talked about a seminary that had gone from training something like 99 priests or 100 priests a year to 0. And in the article it said there's 2 reasons for this: the scandals enveloping the church and the trivialization of the priesthood as seen in the program Father Ted.
Well, there we go.
So yeah,
I mean that's a legacy.
It is a bit of a but and it was great. It really kind of united Irish people, I believe. I've been told that in Northern Ireland, people used to just bond over it, and stuff like this, and it definitely gave Irish people a kind of a way to laugh at the madness of how Catholicism was associated with Ireland.
Yes.
But at the same time, I do feel like, I feel like I'm almost embarrassed now. I mean, it's just so easy. It's so easy to make fun of things that everybody agrees are.
Yeah, that's it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you were to do it now, the real, as we all know, we'll probably be getting onto this at some stage, but the real sacred class now is some imaginary view of trans people that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I'm glad you raised that, Graham. I'm thrilled.
People may not know, but I've become involved in that debate.
Yeah. But I think it's important to, so much of the book is about your comedy career and about comedy, and so I want people to remember that and read the book. But we can't really escape from the element that you in the public consciousness you become also an activist as well now, and this has been the source of your cancellation, of course. But what I will say is, there's an episode of Father Ted. Do you know the one where Ted wins the Golden Cleric Award? And he stands up there and he does a speech and he settles all the scores of all the people he hates. And I thought the book might be a bit like that.
Yeah.
And it really isn't, which is
I nearly called one chapter, and now we move on to liars, which is a line from that episode.
Yeah. But it really isn't that. And I think that's really, really good, and good restraint on your part.
Well, but actually, I have to thank Dan and Simon Edge. Simon Edge is the editor, and he beat that out of me.
Yeah. No, but this, I think that's right. But you do have to address this because, you do address it in the later part of the book. It's the source of your cancellation. People say that you're obsessed with gender identity, with the trans issue, and they make that accusation often. How do you address that?
Well,
If I said to you, are you a monomaniac?
Well, yeah, I would admit that, yes, I am very engaged with this topic because, people aren't doing their jobs.
Yeah.
Journalists aren't writing about it. Comedians aren't telling jokes about it. The news media is not covering it. It's like it doesn't exist outside of...
And because people aren't joking about it, and because the media aren't talking about it, there are huge misconceptions about what it is that you're saying.
Yeah.
And there's a point in the book where you say this. You say the implication is that a concern for women's rights, normal, explicable, is actually obsession with trans rights, bigoted, deranged. But trans rights only become an issue when they negatively affect women's rights. It's that simple. And there aren't too many areas where these conflicts come into play. However, when they do, it's devastating.
Yeah.
That, to me, explains it very, very simply. It does deserve a round of applause. And the idea that we've reached a point where people will mischaracterize you, as they do with J.K. Rowling and others, as just bigots, hateful, etc., as a means to preclude the discussion. It doesn't have to take place anymore. And so they can just demonize and make you a pariah, and the discussion doesn't take place. But you sum it up very clearly in the book. It's not coming from a place of hate. There's an important discussion to be had here.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's almost absurd that we have to point it out. Elaine Miller told me that young girls who go on testosterone will go into the menopause 30 years too early. Yeah. And the menopause is no joke. Another thing I noticed. I forgot where it was. I forgot who my core audience is now.
Tell them more about the menopause, Graham.
These kids have not been told that.
Yeah.
They have been lied to by trans rights activists.
Well, I've spoken to detransitioners who have said they were just not informed of what would happen, and surely there needs to be conversations without just people shouting and saying you're evil. I mean, it's pathetic.
It's because they, I think a lot of them know. I mean, someone pointed out recently, I think it was Helen Joyce. Yes, it was Helen. Helen said that the real problem is going to be the parents of trans kids who have harmed their children for life and will never be able to admit it to themselves. So they're going to fight. You notice that, the really vicious people are often trans parents,
because they've done something that if they were to admit to themselves what they've actually done.
Tell you another thing I noticed. I remember I was driving once and I saw this guy with a walker, like a guy in his 20s. He had a walker on. And I knew he was trans-identified because he had long hair and earrings. And, he looks like he's decided to go down that route. And I saw the walker and I thought, what's going on with the walker? I thought maybe it's a kind of benefits thing or something like this, because I kept seeing, then the next thing I go to a few protests, I see kids with walking sticks, I see kids with walkers.
Yeah.
They have osteoporosis.
Yeah.
Their bones are brittle. And if you're in your 20s and you take a tumble, you walk up and you get on with your day.
Yeah.
But if you have osteoporosis, it changes your life forever.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to be silent about it.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to not be obsessed by it. It drives me insane, like there's, anyway, no, sorry.
Well, the thing is, there is so much that we could talk about and I think we will. And I wanted to spend more on the comedy because I think we'll get to that issue very much in the Q&A.
Okay.
But I think just finally on that, I think one of the most disappointing things for me has been the way in which comedians, people in the arts, people who you've worked with, just haven't really. Well, they haven't even just come out and said, "Look, Graham may have a different point of view than you, but you don't demonize him for that point of view. Don't cast him out of the industry." Just silence has been the
well,
approach.
Arthur was interviewed in Ireland, and he said something like, "Of course, Graham's not a bigot," and I thought that's like saying, "Of course, I'm not a wife beater." Why is it even in question?
Yeah,
I haven't said anything wrong. Women's spaces are important. Children's safeguarding is important. Women deserve fair sports. What's controversial about any of these? And the reason I'm controversial and the reason that I'm considered the way I am is because every time I go on something like a news program to talk about, I get ambushed. And they shout at me and they won't let me speak and they won't let me explain myself. And all it does is it becomes a new kind of bit of havoc in my life that I have to deal with.
But that's another reason why I think everyone should read your book, because you have the space there to explain where you're coming from.
But I tell you what, though, I shouldn't have had to write a fucking book for people to stand up for me.
But then we are living in a time where there are all these books being written that should never have had to be written. No one should be writing a book explaining that there are two sexes. That's something I learned at the age of 3. So,
Yeah, so true.
But the thing is, Graham, I do think you will be vindicated, and I think we're already seeing signs of that.
I don't need them to vindicate me. All I need to do is make some money.
Well, there's that.
All I need to do. I'm
So there's a bucket at the door. And, anyway, we are going to take a break because I think everyone's would like a drink, and then we'll have some questions from the audience for Graham afterwards. So do think about what you might want to ask. See you in a moment.
Hi there. Thanks very much for all your support for women's issues. I'm sure we all agree. I'm looking... yeah. I just want to mention Professor Janice Raymond, Sheila Jeffries, and a few people who started this argument back in the 70s. And also looking to the future, what's going to happen to all these trans kids when their fertility is shot? They decide in their late 20s or 30s that they would like children after all, and we think they're all going to leap on the bandwagon of surrogacy, which is going to be a whole new problem. I understand there's a bill going through in Ireland, which is likely to pass. Our own government is consulting, inspired by the fertility industry, and it could be a whole new lot of... I'm trying to find a polite word, because no child can consent to being a child of surrogacy, and we've now got children of surrogacy coming and speaking out and saying what it's really like.
Well, yeah. I mean, gosh, that would be a good one for me to get heavily involved in right now. But all I can say is that, I've been following the arguments from feminists, and again, I stand with feminists on this. I think there's the problem with a lot of what's going on in general is this blasé, feel good about everything, not really thinking it through attitude, and that's what really worries me. Like, you can see it in the response to, this is going to make you laugh. I just watched it because I went to my friend's place last night. We watched Big Brother, and the trans person in Big Brother is clearly a man. estrogen is doing something to his body. He's you know, he looks like a woman in late middle age. Nothing wrong with that. unless you're a young gay man. If you're a young gay man, it's a bit of a problem, you know. And you know, like, he seems like you know, he's sitting. He did a very funny thing where he sat down and he was talking to, let's say her name was Nadia. It wasn't Nadia, but he was talking to this woman Nadia, and she was going, "So have you got your bits?" and all this stuff. And he was kind of encouraging her to talk, you know, and ask these questions. You know, yeah, you can ask me anything you want, you know. Then he goes into his diary room to vote for who's out. Nadia. Asking too many questions, you know. And it's like this kind of, he's got this thing where he wants attention, but he also doesn't want attention. And he wants to just be seen as a woman, but he also wants to be seen as this special creature that has just kind of popped into existence. And it is a recipe for a miserable life, you know. And you know, this is going to pass. All the people who are calling him a woman and saying he's a woman, they are going to go away and they're going to forget they ever did so.
Can I ask you about that? I know it's not my part of the show, but I want to ask you about that, the clip that went viral from that Big Brother, when the trans individual outs themselves as trans, and everyone automatically does this kind of ritual where they all go around expressing their pronouns around the table. And it struck me very much like it's a kind of liturgical call and response.
Yeah.
It did feel like that. And I also wondered to myself, what would happen if one of them just said, "Oh, no, I don't do that."
Yeah.
The venom, and that's the power of this religious
The person
movement.
in the house who did that would do the rest of the series in the knowledge that their life might be over.
Right.
They might be actually pre-cancelled and get out taboos and people trying to stop them from, you know, they can't be honest, you know. And it's again, it's one of these things. It's not just the effect it's having on individuals and per kids like that guy in Big Brother. It's on all of us. We can't really talk about anything, you know. There's so many third rail subjects now, you know, that you cannot talk about. And how are we going to get stuff done if we can't talk about things, you know? It's I've never seen anything like it.
You've worked with quite a lot of actors over the years. Have any of them said anything supportive to you? I'm thinking about people like Graham Norton, for example, who was in Father Ted, one of the earlier episodes.
Yeah.
Have any of them, in any of the shows, been
No,
supportive
the only
to you,
time,
even privately?
The only time they talk about me is to condemn me, you know. Graham Norton has put his chips in on this issue. He doesn't seem to, like, I always wonder, are they pretending? Are they pretending they don't know the issues? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like Jenny Watson, a young friend of both of ours, trying to do a lesbian speed dating night, can't do it in London in 2023, and Graham Norton is silent. You know? Did you peek her? That's so funny. Oh, good for you. That's great. And you know, there's all these things, and they're very clear, and they're very obviously there. And you have, it's kind of like you were saying about the pronoun declarations. It's almost like a religious display of stupidity. None of us know what sex we are, so we should say it. We should say what sex we are. It's like a little religious observance, you know. Yeah. And the fact that people, like, you know, the fact that it's just causing such havoc, I mean, yet people are just pretending it's not happening.
Can I ask you, because I find that difficult because I always like to assume people are telling the truth, and people are, you know, I take them at their word. But Graham Norton, for instance, when he was asked explicitly, does cancel culture exist? And he basically said no, and he said that we should call it accountability culture. And it was a question that was framed around J.K. Rowling. Mm. And that brings to mind...
What has she done wrong? What did she do wrong? That means she has to be accountable.
And also, does accountability mean daily rape and death threats? Is that a reasonable form of accountability for...
I mean, it's just extraordinary to me that these people, like that I have to say, being cancelled is bad. The lack of money and the isolation is really, really bad. But the thing that drives you more mental than anything else is the fact that everybody is pretending it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing, you know. And the fact that Graham Norton, who, and this is, here we go, this is another headline, but I'm glad. I like calling people out. The fact that Graham Norton, who I had a pretty large hand in making famous, you know, like Father Ted was the first notable thing that he did on TV. And the fact that he can say there's no such thing as cancel culture, when I've had my marriage destroyed, I've had my career destroyed by these activists, and he can pretend that's not happening, I think it's the most, I just think, I can't imagine being so disloyal. I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
And also, we didn't talk about the Father Ted musical, but of course that has not got a home, you know. And that's an example of cancel culture, surely.
Well, you know, yeah. And again, Graham Norton just pretends it's not happening. I was offered £200,000 to walk away from it, and they said, if you walk away from it, we'll make it. But if you stick with it, we're not doing it. And I said no, because this is in the book. I was going to say yes. And then I heard a teammate of Leah Thomas's, the mother of a teammate of Leah Thomas, the male who was on a women's swimming team, the mother of one of his teammates was being interviewed. And I was writing out the document with Jimmy Mulville. I'll take great delight in saying that he was going to lie and pretend that I wasn't.
He's at Hat Trick Productions, I should say.
He was just arranging it so that I would still get paid for my royalties, but he was pretending that I wouldn't, you know. So he and I were writing this statement, and I was going to back out because I thought I need the money, you know, and they're giving me £200,000 up front, and God knows I need that. And then I just heard this interview with this woman. She's in tears because her daughter is saying, what if he comes into the changing room when I'm getting changed? Can I tell him to leave? And she was in tears because she said, it's 2023. I'm telling my daughter, of course you can leave. You don't have to put up with that. You know, it's like, I just don't get it. I still don't get why everyone doesn't just go, this is insane. Why are we letting this happen? And, you know, and again, to return to when you were saying about being obsessed, you know, if there was just one, like someone like Arthur Matthews and Neil Hannon, all they had to do was say, of course women need single-sex spaces. Of course children shouldn't be experimented on with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. You know, of course women deserve fair sports. These are not controversial positions.
Would you say this is a new religion? Speaking as an ex-Muslim, I have, since from the age of 13, when I had my first period, I lost my voice.
How do you mean you lost your voice?
I lost my voice because I was a woman.
Right, I see. Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah, it is a new religion. It's definitely a new religion. There's all these observances that you have to make. There's a sacred class. They happen to be wearing cassocks. No, not cassocks, but they happen to be dressed in dresses. So there's so many similarities. It's crazy. And again, I feel slightly embarrassed about what happened with the Catholic Church, because I think, you know, it's nice to go out on a Sunday and meet your neighbours, you know. And I think that's one thing that we've all lost, and it's led, I fear, I don't want to get too into anything current events, but to an extraordinary dropping away of basic morality, like a basic, this is wrong, this should not happen. I just think that what's happened is the lack of respect for women in general has degraded, especially the left, has degraded their sense of what is right and wrong. You know.
Graham. And can I ask Graham, on that, and what the lady just said is that, you know, this has serious impact on women's rights, I mean, quite palpably. And yet the very same people who are now upholding this movement, bolstering this movement, are the ones who would have claimed that they are on the side of women, minorities. This has been a disaster for gay rights as well. This is like absolutely, you know, as many people have pointed out, I think this is the most dangerous time to grow up gay because, you know, when I was a kid, they'd beat us up in the playground, but they wouldn't have, the headmaster wouldn't be trying to put you on drugs to have you fixed. This is worse.
Yeah. Like someone described it, the best description I ever heard of it was like, it's not true of everyone, of course. There are people who, although I would imagine the numbers are infinitesimal, who benefit from transitioning. But I think in general, someone put it as they're being forced back into a closet made of their own bodies, you know? And if you're telling, like you know, and there's so many stories, like, you know, Susie Green is the best example. She did a TED Talk that was up online for 3 years with no one paying it. Everything was just a normal thing. And she basically says, Dad didn't like having a gender non-conforming son. I wanted to please the dad. The next thing, he's off to Thailand at 16 to be castrated, you know?
And Susie Green is was the head of Mermaids.
Was the head of Mermaids. And that ethos is still there at Mermaids. This is like, you know, there's all these kind of very short-sighted things that kind of grew up. One of them is that homophobia isn't a problem anymore. We're all so advanced. We're all great. We're so accepting. And, you know, the Big Brother house is the most diverse yet. All that sort of thing. But the truth is that there's always going to be homophobes. Yeah. And some of them are going to be your parents.
Yeah.
You know? And these kids need protection from parents like this. But they don't have it at the moment because it's been given this fake name of trans that creates this new cohort that doesn't really exist. It's not, that's another headline. That it's not going to, there's no, someone like my friend Debbie Hayden, who's a controversial figure within the Activism. But Debbie is someone who has had transitioned, who has had an operation. Debbie doesn't have anything to do with Eddie Izzard. Debbie is a transsexual. Eddie Izzard is a transvestite. They have nothing to do with each other.
Is that the problem then? Definitions, the fact that those definitions have become slippery.
The word is used to connect. You know, we always talk about the trans umbrella to such a disparate group of people that it is completely useless as a category. It doesn't make sense. And so when people say, you know, you're saying X about trans people, or you're doing I say, what do you mean by trans? But what does it mean? It doesn't have any stable meaning. And the problem as well, and this is, of course, what I found out to my cost, is that when something like a word like trans has no stable meaning, then the word transphobia can be applied to anyone they want it to be applied to. So what you have is you actually have a political tool that can just be used to destroy your enemies.
Do you think that might be why there's so much misunderstanding insofar as most people have sympathy for people who suffer from gender dysphoria?
People think it's transsexuals.
They think it's transsexuals.
They think we're talking about transsexuals.
Yes.
And by and large we're not. And the thing that makes me angry, the most angry, is that there are fully intact, you know, men on Twitter who are encouraging young kids to transition. Yes. And they have no way they'll get onto an operating table themselves.
Yeah.
But they'll tell these kids that they will be happy if they do it.
I think one of the statistics that really struck me the most was in Hannah Barnes' book about the Tavistock, which talks about between 80 and 90% of adolescents who are referred are same-sex attracted, which means the overwhelming majority of those who are referred, they're just gay. Yeah. They're just gay kids. Like most gay kids are gender non-conforming, or at least a significant proportion. You know?
I think we have to look at this as the crisis that came after AIDS for gay youth. Yeah. That's what this is. This is a crisis. It's a kind of homophobia that escaped and rebranded and is now just creating havoc. I see that guy crossing the road in front of my car in a walker. You know, what is going on?
You mentioned Simon Edge earlier, who wrote a very entertaining book called The End of the World is Flat. And in that book, he talks about kind of a billionaire who's essentially funding this idea that's promoted. To what extent is that true in your experience, and what can be done about it?
I think that there's definitely certain figures who are the Fitzers, I think it is, yeah. Jennifer Fitzer, Pfizer, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. Yeah. So there's a few people who are, but I think, yeah, there's a lot of money, and also, you know, there's this kind of industry that's grown up that doesn't help, which is the HR industry. It's just, you know, yeah. And I think all these things, but generally, I just think it's a kind of a naturally arising mass delusion. I think that's what it is. And I think there's certain people, yeah, if you're trans-identified and you're rich, you're going to pump money into those types of causes and so on. But overall, I do think that it's like the satanic panic.
Yeah.
If the satanic panic had happened after the internet age, we might be living in a very different world.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but it was contained to just Middle America because we didn't have the internet. Now, what happens when gender ideology comes along at the same time as the internet? And you have, and also, you know, people have to try and bear in mind the different forces who are like I always, one of the other aspects of this that I find so frightening, there's a Jimmy Savile program on at the moment, but what the internet has done is it has managed to it allows every Jimmy Savile who doesn't know how to DJ or become famous to coordinate and to collaborate online. And so you will get a situation where you don't need the keys to the hospital because everyone has, you know, it's almost like that now. Like Baroness Nicholson, who is another wonderful friend I've made throughout all this. She said there was a decades-long fight to get single-sex wards. And about 10, 15 years ago, it just started reversing. And so we have a situation where what was it? Someone did a study, 4 years or 6,500 rapes in hospitals. Was it 4 years? 4 years, 6,500 rapes. What the fuck is going on? And then some, they'll tell the women, no, it's impossible because there was no men on that ward.
Yeah.
That's official NHS policy. If a woman complains, they're to be told, you are wrong, there are no men there.
There's someone, Claire Dimion, who is a survivor of breast cancer, and she stated, she wrote a letter saying that she wanted her breast examination, to be done by a woman, a biological woman. And they got her letter and they put it in an official NHS document to say, this is an example of the bigotry that you will see.
Wow.
In an official NHS document.
Can I ask you, to the extent that Stonewall bears responsibility here, insofar as... Oh, wow. There's
Someone was suggesting...
Wow.
Someone earlier was suggesting a musical based on all this, but I think a panto might be more appropriate.
But isn't that revealing? You know, when I was a kid, if someone mentioned Stonewall, the idea that a room would boo at them would be incredible. Because I think part of the problem is...
A room full of gay people and all sorts,
Is the problem that they are...
Also, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Oh.
Straights. I meant straight. All sorts, I meant straights.
But is there a sense in which... I mean, a lot of gay people don't feel Stonewall represents them at all and is, in fact, antagonistic to their interests. But Stonewall is dining out on an old reputation, and they have access to all major corporations, Quangos, civil service, even the Scottish government. I mean, they're deeply embedded there.
Yeah.
Is that rather than millionaires sort of pulling the strings, is it not more likely that it's activists through these means?
But that's what I mean. It's like there's so many different interested parties in maintaining this situation, and very few of them are good. There's a lot of good people on the other side of this who think they're doing the right thing and are trying to protect their lovely gender non-conforming friend, and they've been told by people like Pink News and Stonewall that we hate them and we want them to die, you know? And it's just another aspect to the horrible lies that these kids are undergoing. But, you know, Pink News are doing it because it gets them lots of clicks. Stonewall are doing it because they've run out of causes, you know? Amnesty are doing it for who knows what reason. They all just, because of their salaries, you know. So what we've created is a kind of societal framework that's completely corrupt. you know, and yeah, I don't know how you. I think basically what's been brilliant is like the fact that everyone is booing tonight is great, because it means that Stonewall and Mermaids have been, their behaviour has had an effect. It's fantastic to see some fight back, you know. Yeah. Like in the old days, you know, the way they changed hearts and minds is that they, you know, they went on TV shows, they got into debates, they made their points, they made arguments. And now they just repeat trans women are women 5 times in a tweet.
Yeah.
And we're all supposed to go, okay, yeah, now I believe you, you know? And it's I don't know, it's, apparently, I'm reading a book about mass delusions at the moment, and apparently when the printing press was invented, that's when everything went a little bit crazy. Mass delusions just sprouted up all over the world.
But delusions, that's the key point, because you mentioned the satanic abuse panic. People did believe it was happening, and it was all nonsense.
Yeah, and Diane Ehrensaft, is that her name, Heather? Yeah, Diana Ehrensaft, she was someone who said that if a baby is trying to take off their baby grow, then it's a sign they're trans.
That sounds like a joke.
I know, but it's true. And she was part of the satanic panic.
Okay.
So she went from one mass delusion and just you know, adjusted her story and went on to this one.
Because that's insane. I did a joke years ago about if you feel your baby kicking inside, it's trying to signal that it wants to transition. And that was my Titania character. It was a joke.
Yeah.
And then I heard about this woman saying that it's the same.
Yeah.
It's not a million miles away.
Well, you did that thread where every single Titania joke you did came true. And that's another reason why I don't think you can write a comedy about this. I think it's a bit of a Coles to Newcastle situation. I think that you have to do a documentary. And there's so much footage and so much stuff. It would be an absolutely compelling
The thing I
documentary.
mentioned to you the other day, because there's a video online that went viral of these drag queens in a church in Texas.
Funniest thing.
And it's hilarious because you've got these 12 or 13 drag queens in full elaborate drag, and in a Christian church in Texas of all places, and the congregation are chanting religious mantras about how they will support the drag community. And it's like
these drag queens are sitting there like this. It's the funniest thing.
It's so funny.
They're just like trying to be dignified while they have like these B-52 haircuts, you know. It's the funniest thing.
But you can't top that satirically.
Exactly. That's the problem. You can't parody it. And it's why I have been, in fighting this, I never really addressed it through comedy or anything like that, because for me it's like writing comedy about this would be like writing comedy about a fire during the fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I see what you mean, yeah.
It's like the alarm bells are going. I can't stop thinking about, you know, Keith's daughter and any other kids who are coming up and in, you know, like when I'm still able to move about and be mobile, they will be suffering from osteoporosis, and you know, I just it has to be addressed, but it is a good question of how do you address it. I mean, I think a documentary.
Well, particularly when comedians who do address it get called bigots and evil, and
do they? Yeah.
And they don't get commissioned. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, you know. Yeah, it's a strange time. I've been on this kind of, as I say, a kind of a war footing for 5 years now, you know, and I find this was nice because writing that reminded me I could write jokes.
Yes.
But it's a strange old situation.
You said in the book, over the last 5 years, cancer of the testicles has been the most positive thing that has happened to me.
Yes, that's right.
Hello, my name's Emma. I've met you, Graham, at a couple of events previously, and I have said to you how grateful I am for your support of women's rights. So I want to ask a question about comedy.
Okay, good.
If that's okay. I started reading your book on the train back from Philia, so I'm all about the feminist conferences, and it made me laugh out loud, and it's been really lovely this evening to be able to listen to you talking about your comedy. And I'm just wondering whether writing the book has actually ignited for you something that makes you go, yeah, I'm going to do that again.
Yeah, it did. It really did. Yeah. It was writing. I never wrote a long piece of prose before. I didn't really know how to do it. Doing it once has given me a real taste for it. It's a really nice process. You know, you get one draft out, and then you go over it and over it and over it. And I remember actually the title, when I came up with the title, suddenly everything made sense in the book. It was like, it's all about audiences. And a mob is the flip side to an audience. And there was all, and as soon as I had, again, the true north of the title, that just transformed it. So it was a lovely experience and reminded me of what it's like to be a writer, you know.